Do that. I have in the studios Mr. Dennis Brown. He's been here before from Deloitte. He's a senior manager financial advisory. The first time he passed through, we're talking assessing finance for business in Ghana. Today we're going to go into the Midyear review that was provided by the finance minister, and we'll try as much as possible to get into it. You spend the next half an hour and a half just to go into the budget and find out what it means for the average Ghanaian. Also, we'll be calling some other experts like him also to chip in the roundtable. And if you also have a view and you want to, as always, you can follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on X. It's at ZFMGH. On TikTok and YouTube, it's at Z Multimedia. And the website is www.zmultimedia.com. And the WhatsApp line, as always, is 0544321019. 0544321019. Mr. Brown, welcome. Morning.
Thank you.
It's good to have you back in the studios. Okay, so first of all, this thing about constitutionally mandated mid-year review. The first question that I ask myself, is it really necessary?
Well, I don't know the legalities involved, but if you call it that as constitutionally mandated, then of course the minister has to yield to that responsibility. So taking that context, then I think it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking myself that. Okay, so anyway, this year, if this year's is anything to go by, then it makes sense because it became more like a one-way thing where you spend, come July, come tell them that, you know what, I want more money. So that became monotonous. But now, if what happened is anything to go by, then we can confidently say on last Tuesday that yes, then it is a step in the right direction. So broadly, what were your thoughts on what you heard on Tuesday?
I actually expected the mid-year budget to read, largely the same, as we saw it, mainly because of the IMF program that we are on.
Okay.
Exactly. I mean, if you're on an IMF program, you don't go to Parliament seeking for approval for additional allocations because that presents risk to the program. That entire program and government's access to the credits depends on how fiscally prudent, they stay within the budgets and the targets that they have agreed with the IMF. And that is the 2024 budget statement. So I didn't expect that they would go to Parliament and request for additional allocations. So that means that you want to spend more, and that presents risks to the fiscal targets that you have agreed with IMF. And that means that your next tranche, you may not get them. So typically what we've seen in time past is that when governments have gone to the IMF and have been on the IMF program, over the course of that period, they manage to stay fiscally disciplined, particularly on the expenditure side.
Okay.
I mean, they have their concerns regarding, that being restrictive in terms of some of the policies and programs they want to roll out, but an agreement is an agreement. If you really want the funds, you stay fiscally prudent. And so I wasn't expecting that they would request for additional allocations at all. So I wasn't surprised.
Okay, so that did not deserve a pat on their back because talking to one of the government spokesperson, he actually said, we are not coming to request because we were talking before the minister spoke, and he said he has a draft of it and that we are not coming to request for us. We are not coming with a supplementary budget, and this is the first time in the history. And that you didn't think, it was a big deal. We were not expecting you to because of the IMF thing.
Yes.
Was that your approach?
Yeah, I did. And not to say they don't expect a pat at the back, but because every politician in that situation will, especially around this time, will try to score some political points. So, so well done. But, what we've seen, like I'm saying, is not novel. What we've seen whenever governments have gone to the IMF program is, that they've stayed fiscally disciplined, right? So going for additional allocations, which will present risks to that, I wasn't expecting that. And so, well done, but it's normal. It's normal.
So going into the statement itself, the policy itself, let's start by asking, what did you see as in terms of the expenditure projections and everything that he spoke about, the revenue and expenditure projections? What is your general view on it? Do you think January to now they did well?
Yeah, I think
Or it still comes out to the same IMF. They whip them in line.
Yes, that's the angle I'm taking it from. When you look at the revenue and the spending, I think revenue fell short by about 9% or so. If I just glanced through the budget speech, so that, but at the same time, expenditure also fell short. So it might cancel out in terms of how it plays out in the fiscal space that they're trying to provide. And so yes, they've done well, but I clearly see them toeing in line with the IMF program. And we've seen that they've received, I think, is it a third tranche?
Yeah.
Some time ago, 360 million. And these tranches come after IMF have assessed, their performance in terms of the fiscal targets. And most of the IMF conditions are around the fiscal consolidation. Yeah. How do you mobilize revenue? How do you rationalize expenditure to create that fiscal space? And so if you go for that assessment, that review, you must be able to show that I've stayed within, that budget. And that is exactly what is happening.
Yeah, because I think growth, he said, was continuing to exceed the expectation. And he spoke about 4.7 growth in the first quarter of 2024, which exceeded the 3.1 in the same
previous
period in 2020, previous year, actually. The first quarter of 2023, 3.1. This one was 4.7. So he said, and then he spoke about inflation. Mm-hmm. First of all, let's take it one by one. When the minister says growth has exceeded our expectation, the 4.1% growth reported by the Ghana Statistical Service for first quarter 2024 exceeds the 3.1% recorded in the same period in 2023. What does this mean for the average Ghanaian? In fact, what does it mean first, and then how should the average Ghanaian on the street, be concerned about that? Growth, it means what?
It means the size of the economy is increasing, right? It means economic activities let me not use booming, because we are in a difficult situation. So economic activities, are growing, and the growth shown is much better than the same period last year. Again, with this, I'm not surprised because we've been on a certain trajectory. Look at 2022 was very bad. We're just coming out of, all these debt problems. Exactly. With the domestic debt restructuring. We then, gave access to the first tranche of the IMF, funds. And so we've continued on that path, and the natural thing I expect, within this period that we are following a certain path of stability and fiscal consolidation, is for us to record a higher growth than, previously. Talking about his expectations, I mean, that expectation will be rooted in the 2024 budget. Maybe they set a certain, growth rate, growth targets, which have been exceeded. Okay. But of course, that one, you set it up. For instance, you can set a very low bar, and then exceed it. It can also be a case of just being cautious, right? When setting the targets, okay, we are still not out of the woods yet, so let's place it at maybe 3%, and now you're recording 4.7% and saying you've exceeded your expectations. It's okay, it's fine. For me, the excitement lies in the fact that we seem to be on a growth path. Okay. And we don't want anything to disturb that.
So that's a positive.
That's a positive.
Inflation is declining, and June inflation rate of 22.8%, a reduction of 31 percentage points from December 2022, which confirms the target of 15% by 2024 is possible. First of all, can we do 15 by 2024?
It's possible.
Close of year.
I mean, it's possible, but the risks remain, particularly relating to the election year. Normally very close to election periods, government goes on the rampage of spending, and that tends to, put money in the pockets of people. They also go on, rampage spending. Demand really improves, and that can affect price inflation. Then also towards the end of the year, we have a lot of these business people looking at bringing in imports of their goods. Christmas. So the Christmas rush also presents risk because a huge component of our inflation is imported inflation, right? Okay. So without the cost of the imported goods going up, just the pressure on the dollar can result in local currency depreciation, and that immediately reflects in inflation. So those risks are there. We just have to manage it. It's a very tough target, to get 15% by end of the year, but hey, it's achievable if we can. Because I also look at it from the angle that there are still some foreign inflows that will come in, right? From the World Bank, from the IMF, and stuff like that. So if those come, they might just show up, and from other sources as well. They might just show up and be able to absorb for instance, the Christmas rush, the demand that the Christmas rush brings, and perhaps be able to keep the local differential as a certain stable level, which then means that the pass-through effect on inflation would be much lower. Okay, so let's hope we are able to get there, but it's a tough ask. Now, the statement regarding the margin of drop, 31 something, I think that there's a bit of politics in there.
Yeah, because he didn't pick it from last year. He picked it from 20. I mean, that for me was one of the things when I heard it, I was like, okay, because it's about making the numbers look good. If you said, 31%, wow, amazing. But he didn't pick it from 2023, pick it from 2022, so that it makes it look.
When you check the last year end period, it's around 22%. So if you look at that, then the percentage drop is just about 0.8% or something like that. So
but you have to pick it from yeah. I mean, that's a good one. Inflation is declining. He said that. Now let's go to exchange rates. Guta is already still complaining that listen, this thing, do something about it. Exchange rate, he said, has largely stabilized compared to, once again, December 2022. Despite the recent pressures, the 18.6% depreciation rate to the US dollar as of June 2024 represents an improvement over the 22% recorded for the same period last year. So why are we comparing to 2022? Why are we not doing 2023?
You know what's happening there. You know what's happening there. I think that the improvement, of course, it's more driven by the inflows from the IMF, and we've seen other inflows as well, which comes to show up. I mean, our way of dealing with this thing is too short-termist. Depends on, within the exigence of the time, the inflows that you take, and then it gives you some respite. But few months down the lane, that stock is likely to be absorbed in the market with the pressure, and then we return back to, the same stage. I mean, I know government is continually looking for long-term solution, which revolves around our import substitution, industrialization, so that we can produce a lot of the things that we import and reduce the pressure, to balance things off from that angle. But those policies, some have played out well, some have not been very, effective. And let's
1D1F.
1D1F, yes. In fact, at Deloitte last year, when we did our budget highlights review, one of the key things we picked was how we thought the industrialization drive is not reflecting in the growth of the economy. And when you disaggregate the economy by the three main sectors, agri, services, industry, and you look at their growth, at the time we realized that industry, the year prior to that, had grown by even some negative margin, and then subsequently had grown by just 2% or under 2%. So we had raised the question as to how come we've seen this policy being championed, and a lot being said about factories that are being created, a certain number already in operation and all that. We expect to see a consistent pattern with the growth in industry, but we weren't seeing that, right? And so that was a worry, that something is not connecting well. How come these industries are being created and we are not seeing it reflect in the sector's growth? Now, I look at this mid-year budget and I see that we are reporting about 6.8% growth in industry. Yes, I think I saw something like that, which compared to previously is quite, significant. So I don't know whether this is a case of there being a certain gestation period. For instance, sometimes in economy there's a lag.
Yeah, of course, there's always that time lapse that would...
Exactly, so for whatever policies have been implemented to take shape. But I hope it's the beginning of, more positive things to come in the industry sector, because one of the key challenges we have in this country is job creation, right? And every politician goes about talking about what they will do to address, these challenges. But we all know that the seed of it all sits in the industry sector, being able to raise industries, to then create jobs, because services that don't give you much. For instance, services now is being driven by technology. You can have one person
doing the job of 1,000 people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So industry is the way to go. We all know that, but the policies have to be, consistent. The political will must be there to implement, to ensure that, it creates the necessary impact. So for me, that was a little excitement for me, that I'm seeing a departure from the previous trend, where industry was not growing, and sometimes it was flat. There were times that it was negative, and then there was just a marginal growth. Now we are seeing 6.8% or so. And so that's...
When we're talking industrialization as a means of curbing the foreign exchange challenges our city always suffers, is the concentration not too much on large industries? What prevents us from getting into cottage industries, where we're talking numbers? So, we could set up a whole line of mini industries, value addition kind of places along maybe cocoa or shea butter or something. Are we not concentrating too much on large industries?
Yeah, maybe we are, but even at that, you could set the policy to target it in a large fashion, but then have these small industry fits in, because there's also economies of scale at play. If government has to provide facilitation role, maybe provide certain input, some facilitation, you would want an enclave.
Yeah.
Where
Silicon Valley kind of an idea,
where you are providing those facilitations, and it's not disaggregated and segmented in different parts, which is costly if you have to, provide that facilitation, that support as government. So you want an enclave where then, you can have entrepreneurs fitting benefit from the support that you provide in that enclave, if it's power, if it's water, other utilities, whatever facilitation. So, they can do their thing. Right, so it's not entirely wrong focusing the policy on large scale. It's the mode of implementation, right? It's the approach that then will, then cater for, if you like, the smaller industries within.
Okay, then come to the issue of imports. Some have argued that our taste as Ghanaians is also to do with this. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Taste and preferences taste and preference is something that is developed over a long period of time. Okay. Over a long period of time. So I don't want to blame Ghanaians per se. I mean, I see it coming from a period where whatever they developed, the taste and preferences were not available in the market. So over time, let's say your rice production was nothing to write home about. People have to eat. So people import rice. They are long grain, whatever perfume. From your childhood, that's what you've been consuming up to a point. You develop the taste for it. It's very difficult to, erase all of that at a go. The same way it came, we can also systematically, start psyching people up, bringing the local production up, telling people the benefits, and other factors will come to play in terms of price and other things, affordability and all that, And then gradually over time, if you are consistent enough, it comes with consistency. If you are consistent enough, you'd be able to, push the taste away from the foreign products and onto the local. I think Nigeria, regarding rice, they were able to do it. If you go to Nigeria today, the rice you eat,
everybody says that.
Yeah, local. It's not your fine, tiny, slim, long, whatever. It's the local thick and all that. So that's what you eat.
I'm told that when it comes to eating rice, because you brought rice up, there are some good millers in this country.
Yeah.
Milling high quality rice.
Yeah.
What is up? Why is it taking this long for us to begin to, like you say, try and change people's mindset and this thing about this consumption?
So I think a scale is at play here as well. There are a number of upcoming local millers. I buy a particular local rice, which is very good, and that's after me conscientizing myself that, I want to do this, because over a longer period of time it's been foreign rice and all that. But after I started this local rice consumption, I realized the taste is very good and all that. So, but I think what is at play here is also scale, so we have to be strategic in the way we cover the market with the local production, because there's always going to be a huge gap that has to be met. I mean, people would have to eat, and yes, are you able to mobilize at that scale to feed the market entirely? No. So maybe gradually we push people into the space and provide whatever support we need to provide to them for them to uplift production in that space, because they are also competing with global forces. Of course. If the rice is coming from China, Vietnam, and it's much cheaper, and the inputs that you need here to produce here, makes yours more expensive, then it's a challenge. The entrepreneur is always thinking of that margin, right? Then it's better for me to go and import from China and come and sell. Why would I take all this risk and end up with something that cannot compete with the foreign products that are coming? And that's why in our state, in the current state we are in our development, government role cannot be overemphasized, because it has to continue playing that facilitation and support role, providing inputs in ways that would make it cost efficient for the local entrepreneur to get into that space and to increase production. Over time, we would be able to at least lessen the challenge, or maybe have local industries take over the market. The foreign ones will always be there, because it's not. Sometimes when people talk, they say, oh, why don't you ban it? You can't do that, because you are not living on an island.
It's true.
I always say that you can't do that. You're not living on an island. If you ban it, China will respond with something. Thailand will respond with that. You also export to other places. Those places may be acquaintances to some of these countries. So there will be a response that might even crash your economy. You are just small in the context of the global economy.
It's true.
So it's not as simple as just ban it, or port we ban it. No. You just have to let the market play out. You just have to get local production to be more competitive and be available in terms of the quantities. And eventually, people will shift to it. It has to be down to pure economics. If you go and use any policy,
you might be in trouble. I mean, does the Ghanaian understand this conversation we're having, that when you enter a place and for you, the Ghanaians always think about the cheapest?
Ghanaians are price sensitive, honestly.
Okay.
They are price sensitive, really, and that's at the base. I know other conversations will come in terms of quality and all that, but I think Ghanaians are more concerned with price than any other thing.
Interesting. Gross international reserves reached 3.1 months of import cover as at end of June 2024, against 2.5 months of import cover in the same period last year.
If the IMF inflows came in June, I think it's playing a significant influence on that.
Okay.
I would have added it to the stock, and so I don't want to say it's a one-off, but of course it's part of the statistics. If let's see what happens maybe by end of year, right? Because I think that the timing of that inflow may have, influence, and of course not just the IMF, there are other inflows that came from the World Bank and all that. So they all may be playing a role. Regardless, you can't take it out of the statistics. It is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, one of the big ones too that came up was the negotiation. We've concluded our negotiations with 5 of the 7 IPPs, that's the independent power producers, which will lead to a saving of some $6.6 billion US over the lifetime of the PPAs. That is a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I saw that as well. It sounded exciting. It sounded exciting because power, it's key. And I hope that it gets to translate into the, a reduction in cost of power, particularly for industries.
At the tail end of this discussion, we'll talk about where all these deferred payments are going to hit us and whether we are ready. We'll talk about that, but let's go ahead and go through one by one, because someone has to pay.
Someone has to pay.
We've concluded our negotiations. Does not mean it is free.
Yes.
It means they've just deferred.
Yeah, it just deferred.
Okay, we'll get there.
Debt forgiveness, but
we'll
I realize there's quite a number of...
We'll get there. Then he spoke about the fact that they've reined in expenditure, which you spoke about, to ensure that we are within 2024 budget appropriation and exceeded a mid-year non-oil revenue target by 3.7%. He said we are living within our means. Indeed, consistent with our program with IMF, we are on course to achieving a primary surplus of 0.5% of GDP by end of the year. It's still IMF.
Yes, I mean, you have to stay within. The IMF also, I think when you look at the conditions or the measures, a lot of it relates to revenue mobilization and expenditure rationalization in certain key sectors as well, and oil and cocoa and some other key sectors are part of those that the government was asked to look at and to implement certain measures to boost revenue and to minimize expenditure.
Okay.
So, maybe those measures are playing out. I mean, when it comes to revenue and expenditure, whilst being on the IMF program, I expect us to do well, because the whole IMF thing is around, providing fiscal space, getting that fiscal consolidation right. Okay. IMF is not responsible for the policies that will, if you like, expand your economy, create jobs and stuff like that. Typically, they like to link those measures, which really has to do with revenue mobilization and expenditure rationalization.
In nature.
They try just to link it to some social objectives, so that target poverty, whatnot. But primarily, it's like a bank will deal with an individual, right, regarding challenges that he has with repayment of his loan. If the bank was
so that you're able to pay.
The bank would ask you, maybe where you are living, you are paying $1,000 rent. Can you move to a place where you pay 500 Ghana cedis just to have some fiscal space? If somebody out there was going through with you and trying to help you, improve your influence and all that. That's primarily what the IMF is doing. When they leave us, we would have to come back to, what we need to do to expand our economy, to create industries, create jobs, and deal with other pressing needs.
We've cleared all outstanding bank transfer advice up to 2022 and working hard to pay BTAs from 2023. Bank transfer advice.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, because for me, one of the first things that I asked was, are these payments that are incumbent on governments that they've not paid and then they've cleared up to 2022, and so they are still trying to get 2023. Then came SOEs. First of all, Dennis, should government be in the business of business, or government should just facilitate business?
Yeah, that's what I believe. I always say that I'm an unrepentant capitalist. I don't think government is an efficient manager of businesses.
Okay.
Yes, but of course, government can always play a facilitation role. I mean, particularly because of the kind of politicking we do in Africa as well. The interest from the base is too much, right? So the guy that is managing the resource has, multiples of interest, that he has to look back to. And so you really do not have that clear mind and no strings attached kind of thing that you need to, do what you have to do in that position. The political interest is too much. So I don't think that, governments, particularly in Africa, should concern themselves with, running business. But I know that there are certain sensitive, services, social services like policing, health, and other things, where you need to keep a certain, presence of government in there for strategic reasons. But,
he spoke of two sectors. Let's see if government should be playing there. Cocoa.
The government's role in there should be to help in the standardization process, because cocoa is not like any other product. There's a high level of standardization that is required. You have to meet a certain grade of the bean to be able to attract a certain, price on the market, to be able to access even certain markets and all that. So if you really want to go down the line in terms of the value creation, I think that's where government comes in terms of setting the standards, checking that, these standards are met, so that we are putting out there the highest quality of, cocoa. We are doing the very things that also would increase production and then to benefit from it. And that's where I think government, should come in. That's the role they should play. But if they play that role well, that should encourage other entrepreneurs to go into it and to do it properly, and to.
Then he spoke of energy. that there are also so major reforms of SOEs, especially those in the energy and cocoa sectors, to be fiscally prudent and reduce their risk on the budget. In this same half year, eminent Ghanaians such as the Otumfuo himself had said that, why don't bring private sector into energy? Is that a thought you would agree with?
Yeah, I mean, private sector is already in the energy sector, especially on the production side.
Exactly.
All the IPPs, these are private, plants. What we've not managed to do is to bring a private person into the distribution. So
I'm sure that's what he was talking about. I mean, it's always ECG. It's always ECG. I mean, yeah, great co. Okay, we can manage that place. VRA, yeah, let that one be, but ECG.
I mean, it makes sense. It's happening in other places. For instance, I can tell you about Uganda. Okay. They have an arrangement. Uganda, I think their power distribution entity is called Umeme or something like that. And where they brought in a private person, and over the years, I think, I don't know whether 2-3 years or so, you've seen significant improvement in what we call distribution losses. Okay. Distribution losses are they are a part of the distribution business. What you take,
you won't get all,
down to the customer. But some countries have, their distribution losses much higher than,
because they brought private sector in.
Yes, I mean some have reduced this significantly because they brought private sector in. Some of the arrangements have been that private sector have come in to make necessary investments to improve the efficiency of the transmission, process. Okay, because quite a significant portion of the loss is also related to the inefficiency of the distribution assets and transmission lines and all those things. If they are not operating at optimum level, that can happen. Of course, part also has to do with not applying modern technology that helps you track where power is being used and to be able to bill appropriately for it, right? So people are stealing power and it's not being tracked in the system. That also contributes to the distribution losses. So where private sector have been brought in, they've come from places where they have acquired the knowledge and the experience to introduce the right technology to be able to monitor these things, right? Track them down, cut them off, also to make investments in the right, spaces along the transmission lines to ensure that what is lost in the process of transmission is minimized, and what is then saved in terms of that power, all then gets to be translated into, revenue for the utilities, and then they are not having to depend so much on government budgets and all that.
Okay.
So introducing private sector into the distribution business is a good thing, and I think this government tried it some time back, but I think there was a procedural error or something, and
the almighty PDS.
Yes, and the whole thing, collapsed.
Yeah.
There are other parts of Africa where this thing is happening, and I know for a fact the other African economies that are considering bringing private sector persons into the distribution too, and it goes down to why I said I see myself as an unrepentant capitalist. Wherever government it's in somewhere there. So,
I get where you're going.
You can play
with
regulatory role, you can play other facilitation role, but the pure business side of the thing, if you give it to a private sector whose skin is in and has to benefit from it, they don't joke with it. They'll do what they have to do.
It's just 2 minutes past 9, meaning that we have just around 50 minutes to go to wrap this conversation up. It's getting interesting. Mr. Dennis Brown is here with us. He's with Deloitte, and we're having a good conversation on the Midyear review. If you have views you want to share with us, 0544321019, you can bring that in. We'll read your comments on what you thought of the Midyear budget review by Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, the finance minister, on Tuesday. And also, we've done something lengthy about it. So this week, we are wrapping up the week by going into the budget just so that we're able to better explain it so that the average Ghanaian has a good understanding of it. Then he spoke about something which I'm passionate about, the SME Growth and Opportunity Program. It's supposed to be an 8.2 billion Ghana Cedi fund. Now, SME is the engine of growth.
Yes.
It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be.
For economy like ours.
For an economy like ours. So in the first place, it's a good initiative. But once again, implementation.
That's always been the challenge. That's where the risk is.
What are your fears concerning SME Go?
I mean, for all policies where government would have to make allocation of resources to businesses, this concern that I'm about to talk about, applies. I mean, how is that allocation going to be done? Are there going to be party interests, and therefore that will take priority in terms of, their considerations? Yeah. Will it be normal something for the boys? Because now we have people are dead for us, so without necessarily supporting businesses that have the potential. When that happens, what you see is that people quickly put up, because there will be requirements, typical, okay, your business plan, blah blah blah. People will quickly put those documents together, and of course the one sitting there and assessing to if it's a well-coordinated thing may not really put it to test like that, because there's a certain goal they want to achieve rather than the objective of that policy.
It's true.
Right. So in the end, you may fund businesses that are linked to parties and all that, have political inclinations and stuff like that, without necessarily having the potential to create the impact that this policy was meant to create. That's my number one concern. And that also links to the corruption and all those things. Exactly, somebody's promising somebody, I can get this fund for you if you give me 10%, and all those things are there. But beyond that as well, still with implementation, how efficiently are we going to be able to do this? You understand? The ability to put people there, forget about the corruption and all those things, but even if the one there wants to do the correct job, does he have what it takes to assess, make the right assessments, and then fund the businesses that we expect to then create the impact that we want to create? How is he able to do that efficiently? You understand? Because the fund is there. Maybe if we do that efficiently, we'll be able to fund maybe 1,000 SMEs. If you're not very efficient, you may end up spending all the money on some 500 SMEs when that money would have generated more value. So efficiency in implementation is also very important. And also one thing I've noted is that whenever we come up with these big policies, I think we focus too much on implementation as the real deal, as the success. Okay. So we brought this policy, we want to fund SME business, people line up, we review, give them the money, then we start counting, we put it in our whatever, and we distributed whatever billion to SME. But what has been the impact? I think we are not very good at, further down the lane, taking a pause, conducting an assessment of what has been done so far, and whether it is having the impact that we expected for it to have. And that is one of the key things, like monitoring and evaluation. We mention it in various public sectors, but it doesn't happen very much with some of these policies. And all you hear the politicians tout is, we've distributed this, we've funded this, but what has been the impact of the rollout of that policy? Because you funded it for a reason, so that it will create jobs, so that it will help expand the economy. We must find a way to assess the impact in that manner. And that is where our success should lie. We should be able to say that because of this, we have achieved this margin of growth in the economy. We have been able to create jobs of this much through this program. Sometimes I see some of those numbers relating to one or two policies, but it has to be like how do I even call it? It has to be the regular thing that we do with all policies.
M&E.
And making the reports available, proper structures to collate the statistics so we can see the impact that we are making. And if a policy, it was intended to create a certain impact, but halfway we realize that it is not creating that impact at all because we've been monitoring, at that point we can decide to tweak it. We can decide, okay, this thing is not working at all. Let's put an end to it, bring something else. Okay, rather than just keep following through without assessing the impact and just being happy that we brought this policy and we rolled it out. Just like the industrialization thing I talked about earlier, that we were worried that we were not seeing the growth translate into even in the industry sector, and yet this number of factories have been said, this number of factories have been said, and everybody that says, this number of factories have been, but we have to be able to tell the number of jobs is created, how that is clearly linked to the industry sector's growth. And that's why I said I'm excited to see that 6.8% this time around. And maybe it's because there was a lag period or something like that.
I mean, in this same SME conversation, I had a phone call with one of these prominent men in the trade space and asked him what he thought of SMU Go. And he said, and this is a conversation I've had with him before, his argument was that, listen, rather than get some entrepreneurs who have not tested the market, he said, listen, businesses will go through a dip before they start climbing. Some will last for 2 years and all that. Why don't you give a chunk of that money to individuals who are already in business, who are already established, who need to expand, but not expand in areas of exporting, but who are expanding in areas of importing. And he said, listen, in my organization, there are people who have imported for years, and now they have opportunities to create businesses to export. So yes, I might have exported electrical appliances or something for years, but now I have an opportunity to set up a factory so that I now begin exporting, especially within this continental free trade discussion. He said, don't you think I will be a better person to give the money to? Because one, I am not about to test. I already know the market. I already have my links established and all that. Will I not be a better person to handle this money than for you to pick somebody from university who has a beautiful idea of how to prepare something, and then you put all the money into that person? Why don't you share it in such a way that the two of us are managing it? That's what he said. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I see his concerns, Where I would be a bit concerned about his suggestion is, I don't know whether I got the context right, but sort of to fund businesses that are importing to import more.
Don't put money into the import business.
Okay.
But if they can come to you with a business plan,
yes,
that says we have this, we have that, we are exporting to this, we are exporting to that. He said if you put they and the fresh business or entrepreneur together, they are a safer bet than the entrepreneur.
Of course. They've navigated the terrain and they know some of the risks before they even start. So that's it. But I think it's just the balancing.
It's a balance
here because there's always an extent to which existing jobs can absorb the onrushing of the graduates and all that. So to the extent that some have brilliant ideas that can properly be tested. And of course, they also need to be supported, because it's not as if you give them the money and throw them into the wild. If you really want this to work, you recognize the fact that they do not have the experience, they have not navigated the terrain before, so you provide the necessary guidance as well. If they have to work with some, astute, business managers and advisors over the period to get them more like hand-holding till they can stand on their feet, that is what we want. But I don't think we can. I don't think it's one or the other.
Yeah, it must be both.
Yes, I don't think it's one or the other. A bit of both,
It's true. And then he touched on the vulnerable in our country and spoke about the fact that 5.2 billion had been sent to as support to LEAP, livelihood and this thing, and then school feeding program, social capitation grant, and NHIS. 5.4 billion had been sent to them. I'm using this to ask a question. Are we running this country like a business, or are we running like an NGO? Which should we do?
I think we are not a purely capitalist state,
a country,
but we are more capitalist
yeah.
than socialist.
Yeah.
And it's important we keep it that way. Other than that, if you go to, let's say, the developed countries like the Americas and whatnot, you can argue that largely they've covered the basic needs. So when you look at their elections and stuff like that, you don't hear somebody saying, "I'll provide water over there and win election."
I get it.
Exactly. They have, you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs or whatever, they are up there somewhere. Okay, so you can see that the conversations around the elections are very different. They're talking about gun culture, gay something,
exactly,
Chinese taking the jobs of natives, things like that. But when it comes down here, we are still at a certain level that we need to
KVIP.
Exactly. to take care of the basic needs, and this particularly, gets harsh for the vulnerable, right? These basic needs gets harsh for the vulnerable. So there also has to be a social angle too. These are, if you like, significant capitalist approach to managing the economy. So those things must be there. However, sometimes these social programs are the very ones that are rooted in corruption.
Corrupt.
Yes, and it's down to the way we do it. We take lip. I don't know the mode of implementation, but imagine the designated people that go to certain communities to go and engage these people with those funds. And we all know how it works. These things, I've heard stories though. I don't know as a farmer.
Of course, yeah.
People benefit from it. So does it really get to them? Does it really uplift them in the way that we expect? And it's all down to what we just talked about, implementation and the implementation risk. We have to put measures in place to manage that. Then now there's even technology which we can adopt and use to ensure that there are no unscrupulous people along the chain that are siphoning the funds for themselves. They are enriching themselves at the expense of the ones we call the vulnerable. And that's where I think government, I have already stated, is not doing well. What they tout is, look at how the thing reads. We've allocated,
boom,
5.7 today.
Yeah.
There is no way where we are talking about, and we follow through to ensure that these things read them. As a result, these people have moved from point A to point B. Some of them have had their farms, uplifted. What is the impact? We have to do that impact assessment. It's because
it's not by just sending the money in.
Not by just sending, I've allocated. Somebody does the allocation somewhere down in the communities. What if the person is just, doing his own thing, and therefore is not creating the necessary impact? We have to go beyond just, we've allocated this amount of money against poverty. We've done this to ensure that these funds are generating the value that we expect.
There was this figure he dropped, which, for some reason, all of a sudden, I wanted to calculate. I wanted to do some calculation. We've spent about 1.5 billion Ghana cedis to support 1,488,575 students under the free SHS program between January and June. And I mean, the first thing I saw, when I saw 1,488,500, I saw it like 1.5 million students. We spent 1.5 billion to support 1.5. I mean, you are the figures, man. How much did we spend per person?
So let's not just do
that was the first
calculation.
So immediately I saw it, but I was driving when I was listening to it. I had left the studio, so I was driving. I really wanted to do that calculation. Then I was like, but is it this cancel some zeros and leave 1 0 up there? First of all, we'll come to the calculation. We'll find that figure out. Is this, how do figures people like you look at the free SHS as a government policy?
I mean, of course, it's an expensive policy.
Okay.
I mean, no doubt, it's an expensive policy. And I think it was part of the reason why there was some inertia.
Okay.
When, it was about to be implemented. even from the previous government, who didn't want to commit to it because they didn't know how that will pan out and how to resort to a progressive type decision. But I think that it's been implemented more like the brainchild of the president.
Okay.
Like something that I've held, way back before I got the chance, and once I had a chance,
I'm going to
do it, no matter what it takes. I see
no,
that
I'm
going to do it. Yeah. So it's expensive, and we've heard all sorts of things from civil society. Why don't you, tweak the implementation where those that can afford, will be made to pay, and all that. I mean, I hear all that, but I also feel like, for that to work, our system in terms of data, right, must be absolutely, right, like a national data.
Yeah, because how do you know who can afford it, who can't afford it?
People just can take advantage. Somebody, all of a sudden, somebody will say, "I've adopted my richer brother's, child, and me, I'm not." Position. And so, how it is. People will find it. Once there's a loophole, people will find a way to, benefit. And it might end up even being more costly in terms of because administrative expenses, right, to get the structures in place to be able to do all these things. If we already do not have like a solid system that helps us identify, immediately who is in the bracket where they can't afford, who can afford, and stuff like that. So we have to get those things. Not that that is a bad idea, but we have to get those things in place first
before we can begin.
To other than that, we'll end up going to waste, resources.
Some have also argued that students were paying for exercise books across board. Can't you make it such that, listen, they were paying for exercise books already. Remove some of the things from it to reduce the burden on government. So the calculation is 1.5 billion between January and June. Over 1.5 million is 1,000
per student. Yeah, so it's the numbers that makes it expensive. It's the numbers. But I think when you're operating at a certain scale, per person, you benefit from economies of scale.
Exactly.
So when it comes to feeding and stuff like that, these things are handed out, as large contracts to people. So food supplies and stuff like that, it's not per person. It's not that expensive, but the sheer numbers of those that were outside the system because they couldn't afford and now are having to be brought into the system is what makes it expensive, But again, I think so. The other reason that I've been given by government as why they are implementing it this way, it's equity.
Okay.
Because they think that the wealthy people or the rich people, they are actually the ones that pay the taxes to fund this thing. So why would you discriminate against them because they are doing well? So that's an argument that has also come in. And so, but me, where I place it is that we need to have the data in place to be able to do proper targeting. Other than that, we just start because we say we want to target. And how objectively will you be able to tell that I can't afford, but you can afford, and what happens if that changes over time and things like that. We have to have a system in place that works, that efficiently identifies, and even if status changes, it identifies as well, and then we can change the policy for that person. Once we are not there yet, I think either we are implementing it or not.
We should do it the way it is now, or we don't do it at all. And since no one is promising to touch it. But now we're even fighting about who launched.
Yes, no one is promising that because
so this is going to be the way it is.
It's a sensitive.
It's very sensitive now. 12 billion Ghana cedis to bondholders under DDEP.
Confidence,
The DDEP.
The DDEP. I mean,
how did it affect, and how is it going to affect us going forward?
I mean, we know what the DDEP did to confidence of investors. And this time, these are local investors.
Yes, these are local investors.
Where you get your treasury bills and bonds to fund some of the program. You know what it did. Haircuts is not a funny thing at all, to the extent that former Chief Justice had to.
I mean, even today she was very hard on government in some papers.
Picket and all that. So clearly, they've come from a very hard place. We've gone past that with certain promises that, okay, we've done some haircuts, but going forward, we are going to honor these, commitments, etc. So it's good to see government, honoring the commitments as promised, because that works in, bringing back confidence. Not that alone, but these investors will now keep watching how the economy turns out closely. And if we continue on the trajectory that we are on, plus government, paying what they have to pay, the confidence will keep growing, because you don't want to be in a situation where people have lost confidence in treasury bills and bonds anymore, because they're a very useful source, for financing government programs, etc. So yes, that's the impact. Just to bring back the lost confidence from
10 billion in the road sector since January to enhance transportation and spur growth. And then he added that, and this one I think even it's in today's papers, he added that government has secured equipment to complement the efforts of local authorities in improving community roads nationwide. There is a call for the local assemblies and the municipal authorities to be given some equipment to grade roads and all that. There's been some calls by local government experts that is actually a wrong move, in the sense that what expertise do those guys even at the local government have? And is it just to maintain road? And if it's maintaining roads, does that not need expertise, or what does it? So there's already an issue there, but it was read that these things are coming. And today it was in the papers that they have arrived, and according to the vice president, was just left for the distribution. What are your thoughts on the local government in terms of the road? Of course, I mean, that one is a no-brainer. Of course, the more roads we have, the more developed, the more open the country becomes. But looking at local government's role in improving community roads. First of all, when this thing came up the last time, I think a month or two ago, the fight was it construction of roads or improving of roads? But I think here he's made it improving of roads.
So killing potholes.
Exactly. Should local assemblies be involved in this? Is it pushing us towards what we've always wanted, which is to decentralize government?
I think so. For me, it's one of two things. Either we are trying to improve the decentralization, agenda. We are trying to sort of, roll it out. Or if I want to be a bit diabolical, we're in an election year, right? There might be the edge to take some of the money down there.
Okay.
I mean, the votes are in the communities. So if you want to be high-handed up there and say, you go and contract, and then we'll pay the contractors from here. Maybe they will show you.
It's a very nice way.
Maybe they will show you pepper. So maybe it's about time you get some of the funds down there, get some of these assemblymen and whatnot to control something, and get some excitement out there. Just being diabolical. I mean, I'm not being factual. I don't know why. But for me, it's just one of two things. Either that may be the objective, or perhaps it's in pushing the decentralization agenda. Because I think I've heard government spokespersons talk about the benefit of decentralization recently, and why there's a need to also empower the local authorities at that level, right, to take some of these decisions regarding who they even give the contracts to implement some of these things. So there have been talks about that, but I wouldn't really know at this point in time whether that genuinely is what is motivating this, or some other diabolical
infrastructure. You spoke about and mentioned a number of them. Konfanochi Teaching Hospital, Ufanko in Sawan Road, Kita Water Supply, and then the one I was waiting for because of I have been mentioning it, Ubeche Bilamti.
Okay.
Interchange. And he also spoke about the flower pot. and the 3 bypasses on the Kumasi-Accra Highway and the Tema-Impakadan Railway line. Do you see us as doing enough as a country to improve our infrastructure?
I mean, the gap is big. The gap is very big, and so the gap is big. Resources are limited, and so sometimes when you contextualize, you would say, okay, we are not doing badly, right? But when you look at the sheer, room for improvement, then it feels like we are not doing much. But it's also resource availability question, for instance. And then somebody will also argue that, well, a lot of the procurement process around this ends up, increasing the cost for us anyway. Something that can be done with 100 million, and I mean 450 million or 200 million, the rest, going to the pockets of, people within that value chain and all that. So, yes, maybe we are putting up the infrastructure, but are we doing it in a way where it's value for money? Because if I have 200 million, I can use it to do 2 interchanges. That's more value rather than doing 1 interchange because somebody has, inflated prices for their own, benefits. Those are the concerns when it comes to infrastructure and whether we are doing enough, because resources are limited and they will be limited, and so the judicious use of resources is important. Perhaps we could do more with the resources that we have, but overall I think there's been progress from successive governments.
Okay.
And we need to.
Yeah, but I mean those are the benefits of democracy. I say it always, and I say that without apologizing because it is the truth. And I use a very basic example, my own movement. So this is it. I stay in Dansuman, and I know what this Kwame Nkrumah Circle interchange did for my movement into town. I mean, as a private business person, in those days, if you had a meeting in Osu, you would have to budget some 2 hours extra because of the traffic around Circle. If you tried using Adabraka, you'd be caught there. If you tried using the, North Kanishi, you'd be caught somewhere. So Kwame Nkrumah interchange was super because then you could still work and give yourself maybe 30 minutes and you'll be in Osu for a meeting. Now, I'm now looking at it this way. If the Obechebi comes to add to it, meaning that you could zoom in from Dansuman, use Obechebi, use Kwame Nkrumah Circle, and cut the journey by half. So for me, that is real. That is tangible. One done by one government, another one done by another government. I couldn't care less if another government comes and says, you know what, now let's do Malam something. Let's do. For me, I'm seeing these things. And so I'm saying, listen, let's continue in this trajectory. The only problem I'm having, especially with infrastructure, is, like you said, it's taking too long, and it's possible because of what you're saying that maybe the money that could do 10 of the interchanges is doing 2. Because the rest is going somewhere else. If we could have done that as a country, I'm sure this democracy thing we will feel it tangibly.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's true. The major issue is the corrupt activities around it. But I've also indicated that. I believe that the seed of all of that is how expensive our political process is.
Okay.
A greater part of the motivation for people that are corrupt and are trying to survive it's from there, because when you look at a political process, right? If you look at even party primaries, I mean, people are sharing fridge, bicycle,
television.
I mean, even for what we know of even wealthy people, they don't misuse money.
No.
people are wealthy for a reason.
I know a businessman who, when he hears of this sharing of stuff, it can bother him. Sometimes he sits for hours and he's worried. That who shares TVs to voters?
So even if the people are wealthy, it should tell you that to them it's not a misuse of funds. It's some type of investment.
They will collect their money back.
Somebody invests.
they'll
find a way to get. And so that's for me a huge, portion of that the motivation, to do these things. It's coming from there, because even if I put myself in their shoes, if I spend 5 million to be elected as I should get it back.
You get more than 5 million. You get like 10 or 20.
Exactly. And
meaning that if they gave you 50 million to do something, already 20, we are owing you. Ghana is owing you 20 already. So the thing is down with the amount to be shared plus interest. You are absolutely right.
So the procurement only provides a window. The procurement around infrastructure provides, because infrastructure is also capital intensive. It means huge monies.
Yeah.
So
ports and all.
If I can get 10% of one interchange contract, I don't have to do too much. If you have to do too much, that one at some point you may be caught. So
this one just 10% of one interchange.
And the motivation is coming from there, because the process is too expensive. Just party primaries, you are having to share these things. Where do you get the money from? Because even if you're a wealthy person, like I'm saying, wealthy people don't.
No.
Huge funds
those
like
who's made money, no, they wouldn't.
The other side is that even for those that are not wealthy, and we've seen young people go to parliament, definitely they have political investors.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Political investors, why are they investing in you?
They know that when you get there, and I'm told sometimes you need to tell the person, I'll help you get there. When you get there, I want this, I want that, I want
exactly.
this. Yeah,
so a lot of it is coming from that, and we have to deal with it, in that way, how expensive that process. We have to deal. If we deal with it, I'm not saying it to eradicate corruption entirely, because somebody is just by their nature, whether they've spent 1 cedi or not, when they go there, they will still try and make. But at least we are going to begin to win the war against corruption.
It's true.
And the infrastructure thing you're talking about, procurement revolves around it, and that provides an easy, like a low-hanging fruit for those that want to do pa.
It's true. Because I'm looking at what it can do for us as a country, and I sometimes, my thinking when it comes to issues of development and economics and all that is to bring it to as micro a level as possible. So the anecdotes and the stories I share are of real Ghanaians benefiting from we doing what is right, and just that we are not doing what is right enough. Because
not consistent enough.
Yeah, I also recall one time flying out of town to do a program somewhere in Kumasi. And I recall whilst we were checking in, I looked in the line and I saw this very big man I know who happens to run one of these big brands in town. And he's into sanitary pads, he's into soap, detergents. His brand is very big, in this town. He was in a line. And he was in a cargo shorts, with the pockets all around. And he was wearing a polo shirt. And he was holding a rubber bag. And we were checking in. And my first impression was, where is this guy going? He's dressed like he's going across the street from his house. Very rich man. And we check in, we get in on the flight, we get to Kumasi. And then as I were checking out and all that, I realized I didn't see him. There was this car coming to pick me. I came outside of the airport, and then I saw that, it was coming from the washroom. He was dressed, ready for a funeral. With his cloth and everything, with his chain and all that. I'm like, oh wow. So that was what was in the rubber bag, because he was dressed ready for a funeral. Then I go do the training I was doing in Kumasi. I come back, and funny enough, I was coming back with him. He was back in his polo shirt, he was back in his sandals and his everything. He flew to Kumasi for a funeral. He was coming home. That is a country that is open with good transportation. Air transport is working, and all that. It makes life easier and more productive.
Exactly. You don't have to waste hours on the bus if you don't need to.
You don't need to if you can. And so for me, these things, when it comes to infrastructure, I always say it is one of the areas that if you can, I'm not saying go and chop the money. If I say that, I'll be in trouble on air. But some areas you can, but when it comes to infrastructure, do what is right.
Infrastructure it's seeing is believing. If it's there, it's there.
There's a road that was done in some part of my area, and it's opened the place up just like that. And people pass like, oh wow, I want a property here, I want a property here, just because a road came through that area. So infrastructure for me, anytime I'm listening to budget being read, I'm going into infrastructure and all that. We have less than 20 minutes to wrap up this conversation, but I want us to also touch on one of the things he spoke about. To advance our digitalization drive and expand our unique identification system, we've invested about 135 million Ghana cedis in a national identification program since January 2024. How important is the identification?
In fact, I've even spoken in part about it.
Touched
on when we were talking about targeting properly when it comes to the free SHS.
Exactly.
That we need to get some of these databases up and running. The databases have to be connected to other databases in a synchronized manner, so that when I type your name or your details, it should tell me everything that I need to know about you, where you work, maybe bar other sensitive data that you probably need clearance to get, but you all be in the system, to be used as and when. So it's very, very important. I think the fact that we've not sorted our national ID database, issues yet is also contributing to why, we are experiencing slow progress in terms of our development. Because just think about it. It means you don't have, the opportunity to be precise when it comes to policy rollout and implementation.
Exactly, we're not too precise. We're doing a lot of estimation.
True. This thing. You know that, okay, this thing would work, but you also know that it has to be targeted properly. It is targeting a particular kind of people. How are you going to see the information on that? If we have a national database that is connected to other databases, we are in the technology age. Wherever you access services, your data must have a way of getting into the system for verification and other things. And so we should be able to put up something comprehensive so that if government wants to, if we had done that, let's say in time past, government wants to do free SHS, somebody sits behind the distance and does the analysis. This is how you should target it. These people can't afford, these people, they are okay, and all those things. And other policies regarding the even leap and these other things, they are supposed to be targeted at a particular group of people. But how do we know them? We rely on somebody in the community, and the resource goes to the person.
Some non-scientific means of
and so the national ID thing is very, very important. But I feel like over time we spend too much money on it. I've seen previous budgets where we've allocated money to it, and why are we not getting there? I mean, it's too slow.
It's too slow. That's what I keep saying, that some of these things are too slow. It's because the one Ghana that's supposed to be used for 10 things is being used for 2, and the rest of the money.
It's too slow. The commitment, I think that some part to a lack of political will has played out, because there were times where places like Abosu Kai magazine and whatnot, they have thought about this national ID thing as they are trying to drag it into some tax debt to be taxed and all those things. The education must be improved so that they see the benefits of it too and all that, because people sometimes tend to think of these things, they want to catch you in a particular net and just be slapping you with taxes. So even though the thing is made available, go and register and get your ID card, there is some inertia, right? We have to begin to get to the point, once we've done enough education and people are still being reluctant, then we eventually get to that point where we have to be radical. Yes, you have to be radical. If you don't have it, then you will not be able to access certain social services. You can't go to a public hospital, you can't go to the police station to go and report, you can't go there. Then people will
be forced to
get, because you give the chance, you give the leeway for them to understand. You've done your education. There's always a limit to it. You've done enough. Now you have to have that political will to implement this thing in a more radical way, because over a medium to long term, everybody will come to see that it's been of benefit.
Another big one. We will work with the private sector to close the national housing deficit and optimize land use in urban areas. We will use public-private partnership, PPP, to deliver public infrastructure projects. Housing.
I mean, it's not novel, is it? We've seen affordable housing projects.
Affordable has been like for decades. Every time we hear
affordable housing. Yeah. Then later you hear that, oh, the previous administration, they sold it to their people before they left. So even though the thing is not completed, I don't want to go and complete it for other people to chop. Like a didija. Like people have chopped the thing already, want to go and prepare their food. Then another government to come, the same thing. Oh, they started here. You know, it's not like we don't know what to do. But
can housing be affordable?
Now these days, right? These days there are, you know, varying forms of putting housing together with different materials. For instance, sometimes I follow real estate people on YouTube. You see houses where they are just containers.
Yeah,
with small support, like concrete support and stuff like that, which when you check the prices, way cheaper. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a technical person. I don't know whether other quality concerns will come to play. I mean, when you are in such a place, will it be like the ventilation be okay? But when you listen to those people that know about it, they say those are not issues. They have a way of, you know, dealing with those things, right? We've also heard things like other plastic materials being used to build and all that. So these things are relatively new, so maybe they are not really permeating the system as much as is shown. But when you take it from that angle, you can say, yes, there can be affordable housing. I mean, do we all need to live in concrete houses if we can't afford it, right? But when you come to the normal house that we know, the concrete house, the challenge is really, really a tough one, because you see a lot of the building materials, you know, being imported as well. Now, even though when you take even cement, even though there's local production, we learned that a lot of the inputs that goes into the production of cement are imported. You know, so you can imagine in 2021, getting into 2022, I could say that some very basic and key construction materials had their prices, some tripling, some, you know, quadrupling. Okay, that was, you know, post-COVID and the effects that we had. And you could see a lot of building projects being stalled in and around that time because the funds that were budgeted for it couldn't, you know, do much anymore, right? And that's down to the fact that a lot of these materials are imported. The only way I can say for the concrete type of houses we would be able to achieve something that is affordable is if we look at that. How do we deal with the fact that a lot of these things are imported? Is there a way we can substitute with local production that is cheaper? You know, because, I mean, other than that, it will still fall back on government. What does affordable mean to government? Implementing affordability. Because sometimes when government says this, it means it's a burden on the purse, on the taxpayers. Yeah. That's what it means.
Because that's what it means.
Yes, it's not like there's a technology that will you know, birth affordable houses in that sense. But basically, maybe I'm absorbing as a government, I'm absorbing part of the cost. You know, and in that situation, we have to continuously ask whether that is sustainable.
It's true.
You are talking about low tax to GDP ratio. You are talking about this. You are talking about this. So, do you take this burden?
Subsidizing houses that in itself is not affordable.
That in
itself is just that they are not the ones paying.
Yes.
But you are talking of a technology that will make houses genuinely affordable.
Genuinely affordable.
Because you are using local materials.
Materials and other, you know, construction materials that are coming to the fore. So maybe we need to look at those as well. For instance, if you are targeting the vulnerable and, you know, those that are really in the poor brackets, why don't you look at this container thing? You know, like have an enclave where you put up these things, make sure the structures
and guess what? Once again, let me give you a personal experience. So there is this land belonging to someone who I know who had not used it for a while. Then one day someone calls me and says, your boss's land, come and take a look. When I went there were people all over the land. And they were like makeshift or some structures all over. And they had a name, they called it container something city or something, some funny name like that. So I call him and it's like, yeah, he knows. There's something people do, He has no problem. They can be there for 10 years. He couldn't be bothered. The day he wants his land, he can just go and clear all of them. So what you're saying is absolutely true. Already people are living in these things. So it's just about upgrading
it, making sure you provide the basic facilities,
so you're absolutely right. Also on affordable housing, I recall some years back when I was in banking, there was a company that came to town that needed not banking support, but needed government green light to build affordable housing for, I think they wanted to start with nurses and doctors. And so they had a model house inside Kolebu, a model house. Their technology was making use of, what do you call the white thing that when you buy your new computers and stuff, they use it to protect those white things that, when you buy yours, those days you are going to buy teeth or something.
Okay, that thing.
Kaku or something called Kaku or something like that. They were using the technology of Kaku mixed with mesh, metal mesh. I'd never seen anything like that, and I thought it was super amazing. They could build even storage out of it. They used Kaku and used mesh. When I say mesh, I don't know what else to call it. Like, metal mesh that our women will use to roast fish, or we'll put it in our windows.
Sometimes it's in the hen coop or this.
Thank you, something like that. They were combining that and that white Kaku or that poly whatever form it was, and they were using it. How come that project didn't fly? Someone frustrated them in government. They needed something nobody minded, because like I say, it means somebody's not going to get some of their percent. They frustrated them and they left the country. And I'm pretty sure and guess what, after they've done all that design with the mesh and the Kaku in between and all that, then they would actually spray it. Those cement spray kind of thing that leaves houses looking, very good for lizards to climb up and down. That kind of, they would spray the whole thing, and when you stand back, you wouldn't see what it's made of. Amazing technology. Someone frustrated them. So it comes back to the same thing, that regardless of what the finance minister is saying here, there are still challenges in there where he could come and give us the figures, but those figures could have done a lot more if these things you are talking about are not there. Let's touch one more thing. We have just 5 minutes to go. I don't know whether this one will take us 5 minutes. The establishment of a framework for the reintroduction of road and bridges tolls in 2025. Tolls are coming back. Road tolls are coming. Yes. The one on the Kaswa Road there. The one by Barrier. It's coming back. Mensa is coming back.
I guess the key question will always be, okay, so what's the motivation now? And I'm sure the low-hanging one will go, E-Levy disappointed.
So should E-Levy go so that road tolls come, or E-Levy is still going to stay while road tolls also come back?
I'm not sure E-Levy will go away. They will take the small that comes. And in fact, so when you go to even other African countries, it looks like they are all doing the same thing. With COVID, they started, all these expensive. You get to the airport, COVID levy, this security, blah blah. Then COVID went away. Yet you go to these places and they've just changed the name. There's no more COVID.
So what you're saying is, if you begin to give government money,
No.
He will never let you go.
No. I best we change the name. We change the name. It's not good. So they just change the name from COVID to security levels. In and out. So I don't think, they are going to take it away. They probably didn't meet the target in terms of what was projected, but they will take it away. They are probably looking for the road toll to come and even complement to what is there. And I'm not too sure whether I think it was previously the concern with the road toll was also that it wasn't being administered well.
Okay.
It wasn't being managed well. There was no proper scientific way of checking that what is being reported in terms of the collection. So it's actually what is collected. But when you go to other places like South Africa, some of the roads that lead to Sun City and all those places. So the toll thing has been completely
digitized.
Digitized.
You drive by, poof, it just takes you on.
Yes.
In Dubai as well. Nobody's standing anywhere.
Nobody's standing anywhere.
Money.
And so the money is not getting into any other person's pocket for there to be accountability issues and stuff like that. I hope they are thinking of, when they say establish a framework, I hope they are thinking of some of these things and not to revert to another a framework that is manual and then later to come and complain again that this thing is not.
You've brought up a very good point. Yesterday when we were talking about it, it didn't really come to mind. If they are reintroducing road tolls, then it shouldn't be manual.
Yeah.
Because the technology is there.
The technology
I know
is there.
Ghanaian, software developers who have developed something like
Yeah.
that they wanted to test in one of their lorry stations. I recall vividly that I sat in a presentation like that. The technology is there where you pass and then it just picks your car number or something. And then I know in the Emirates or something, that one is a yearly thing.
Yeah, you can even pay
at the end of the year when you're going to do your roadworthy or something, they add it to it and all that. So yeah, these are things that we could consider. We should use technology to cut out some of the loopholes that we've discussed today. We should have even gone on and spoken about tourism, and then there's trade and industry, sports and all that. But time is up. I mean, when the conversation gets interesting, time also runs quickly. Mr. Dennis Brown has been with us from it's been exciting.
Yes.
I mean, we should come back and continue this discussion. Maybe we won't get into trouble in the next time. But any final words? Any final words on what you had the Finance Minister produce?
I mean, I think the main purpose of the mid-year budget statement was just to inform us on progress, how we're doing so far. And that's precisely what he went to Parliament to do. As you indicated, there's not been a request for additional allocation, which I believe they are not in the position to do so anyway because of the risk it presents to the IMF program. Yes, we made some progress in terms of economic growth. We've seen inflation dropping marginally. We've seen depreciation also slows down, which has an impact on inflation. We hope that going forward we'll be able to sustain it. Although we know that election is around the corner, December is also around the corner, the risks are there. At least let's try to manage those risks so people economically are not worse off.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dennis Brown is a Senior Manager, Financial Advisory, Deloitte. He was here today to join us at the Friday's Roundtable, where we were looking at understanding the 2024 Midyear budget review and all its implications for the economy and citizens. All too soon, we're wrapping up Z in the Morning, not just for today, but